Yes. All right, so this is podcasting for librarians. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat so I can see who's here today while we give people another minute or so to get in. Somebody from Kansas City. Awesome. I've got my other screen over here so I can see what's going on. So if you see me looking to the side, that's where I can see the chat easy. That's hello to Wisconsin, Illinois. Some people from North Carolina. Awesome. This is already in the chat, but I want to remind you guys again that you can go to bit.ly/pods for librarians, PODS FOR LIBRARIANS. And there are going to be some, there's some links in there that you're going to want to go to during the presentation. So you might pull that up in another tab. All right, so a little bit about me. I am the librarian and STEAM coach at Butner STEM Middle School. I actually just started there on January 11th. Prior to that, I was a elementary school librarian in Franklin County. I have 15 years of experience in education and have been a librarian since 2015. And I started the Tech Plus Books podcast with two of my colleagues in 2019. So we've been doing that for just over a year. You can reach out to me on Twitter or Instagram. All right, so I thought I would go ahead and get a little involvement here. If you guys have never used Mentimeter, it is a polling application. You can go to, at the top, it says go to menti.com and use that code. Or if you have the presentation up, you can just click where it says click here to vote. And let me know how often you listen to podcasts. So, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the results up. I really love Mentimeter. If you've never used it, I like that you can add GIFs for the choices and make it kind of fun. You can also upload your own presentation into Mentimeter and use that for your presentation to have these polls for your presentation. So we have one person who's never listened to podcasts, quite a few who listen to them daily, and then a couple in the middle. That's good to know that that I've got some newbies who have is brand new to this, and then quite a few people who are daily listeners. Awesome. So while you guys are still working on that, just want to let you know if at any point you have any questions, I'm going too fast or anything, just type it in the chat. Devin's watching the chat for me. She's helping me out with that. And I'll be happy to slow down, speed up, or do whatever we need. I'm pretty flexible with what we talk about today. So if we get to a point where you guys want to focus on something a little bit more, that is perfectly fine with me. All right, so we got a good little mix there. Still a lot of daily listeners, but some newbies and some monthly listeners. Awesome. All right. So why podcasting? Why is this something librarians would want to do? Why do people love them? You know, why are we having this webinar today? I pulled up a couple of statistics. So in 2020, 75% of the US population was familiar with the word podcasting, and that's actually up from 70% in 2019. Don't have 2020 statistics yet, obviously, but it is an increasing, it's increasing in popularity. I love this statistic. So this is showing the age of monthly podcast listeners versus the percentage of the US population they are. So the US population, is 37% of us are 12 to 34, but 48% of that age group are monthly listeners of podcasts. So podcasts are clearly most popular among young adults, teenagers and young adults. And then age 35 to 54, they're 40% of the population. Only 32% of them are monthly listeners. So they're getting close to the same percentage as the US population. And then age 55 and older aren't listening to podcasts as much, but they're getting close to what their percentage of population is. Podcasts are listened to equally by males and females. So you're reaching a little bit of everyone. And people are listening at home, and 22% are listening in the car. So you're reaching people everywhere. And I put this one up there because I feel like librarians probably fall a little bit in education and news. So comedy is the most popular genre, but that's followed by education and news. Podcasts are consistently gaining in popularity. You can see on this chart since 2006, it's been a steady incline. And smartphones are really what people are using for podcasts. Sorry, my dog just opened my door. Billy, can you close the door? You can leave Lucy in here. Sorry about that. I got my dog has figured out how to open our door. So smartphones are really driving podcast usage. And you can see on this chart that that's becoming increasingly so. And this stops at 2017. So I imagine it's probably gone up even more. So the great thing about podcasts is that you can reach people wherever they are. You know, you're not constrained by, is this person going to be home at a certain time? Or are they going to have access to a computer? You're really reaching people at their own convenience. A lot of people listen in their cars, on their commutes. They listen while they exercise, while they're walking, while they're running, whatever. So it's a really great way to reach people anytime, anywhere, and reach those, as we saw from this last slide, those teenagers and younger listeners. So I provided the links for these statistics if you want to dive a little bit more into them later. So my goals for today are to share my experience starting a podcast and to provide you guys a collection of resources and tools that you can either use for creating your podcasts or for helping your patrons who may be interested in creating their own podcasts. So I'm really going to focus on ways librarians can use podcasts to promote your resources and programming, ways you can use podcasts for instruction. And even if you don't want to create your own podcast, you may have people, patrons at the library that do. And so you can provide spaces for them, equipment recommendations, maybe circulate some equipment, and assistance with them recording, or at least provide them resources and technical help when they're recording on their own. Before I dive in, anybody have any comments or questions? We good to go? All right. I did create a Padlet of resources, and the link is in here. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. Maybe. So this is public. It's not going anywhere, so you can refer back to it later. We're going to have some opportunities for you guys to share some ideas or resources throughout this webinar. But you can see I've already added a lot of the resources and things that I'm going to talk about today are already in here for you. You can just save that link and come back to it whenever you want. You might want to go ahead and open that up in another tab. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is using podcasts to promote resources and programming. There's quite a few podcasts out there already done by librarians. You can see those in the Padlet. I have some links to some of them. Obviously not all of them. If you know of a podcast that you love or you want to promote, feel free to go ahead and throw it there in that Padlet for everybody. But some of the things you'll see that librarians are doing with podcasts, or they're using them to book talk, they're using them for book clubs, they're promoting events and classes using it. You could use a podcast for like an Ask a Librarian service. So people could, if you have like common questions that people ask all the time, you can go ahead and address that in a podcast, and then you can just refer people back to different episodes of the podcast when those questions come up later. You can highlight your services using podcasts. And the last one is really my why. This is what got us into it. We really wanted to connect and collaborate with the community, but also with other librarians. I know most of you are public or academic librarians. I'm a school librarian. And as a school librarian, I'm the only person in my building that does what I do. So we started our podcast because we wanted to have a platform for connecting and collaborating with other librarians. We actually do several of these in our podcast. We do some book talks, we give some tech tips, and we talk about library issues. So there are some library podcasts where they just do one of these, like it's just all book talks all the time. Or they just talk about hot topics in librarians, or they just highlight different services and interview different people that provide different services. So there's really any kind of format that you want to do for your podcast. It really just is determined by why you're doing it and what your goal is. I thought we could go into the Padlet now. And I have a place on here, and you don't have to do this now. You can do it now, you can do it later. But under podcast ideas, I left that open. if you guys have any other suggestions or ideas people might want to use podcasts for, as far as promoting their resources and programming, you could add your ideas right in here. If you've never used Padlet, you can just click on you go in, you click on this plus sign, and then you can, you can put what you want in the title. You can write something, you can add links. There's all kinds of things you can do. So if anybody wants to add anything in, I see somebody put local history is a cool idea. Encourage students to create podcasts, special collections. So I'm just going to give you guys a few minutes if you want to go into the Padlet and add some ideas. I love crowdsourcing new ideas. I see in the chat, Uncle Rose put presentations related to an all-campus read. That's a good idea. Highlighting themes, digital humanities, oral storytellers, recalling events in local history. Love it. Love it. So again, just a reminder that this is a public Padlet and it's not going anywhere. So if you want to come back later on and look through some of these or add some more ideas. Restaurant reviews, community roundtable. Bring in members of the community. Awesome. All right, so loving y'all's ideas. Thanks for sharing. Somebody in the chat says collect oral histories of coronavirus. Making connections between fiction and historical events, interviews with faculty, staff, administrators, all good ideas. So definitely, if you haven't already, check out the Padlet for more ideas on how to promote your resources and your programming podcast. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to using podcasts for instruction, which kind of runs into some of your ideas. But I know we all do a lot of research instruction, teaching students and visitors how to access our digital resources, how to do citations, how to use different technology, and then also seasonal things like helping people with their taxes or helping people get registered to vote, learning how to vote. During COVID, you know, librarians are out there providing people with information and resources, lots of help with careers. So these are all things that you could make short podcasts about, not only when they're timely, but you could have a whole, if you have a whole database of short podcasts about instructional topics, you can just refer people to those. So you're not constantly going over the same things. If you get a lot of questions about a specific database or specific type of technology, something like that, you can use these to supplement your instruction. So, so you can refer people to them. Obviously you're still going to help people face to face and in person, but it's just something that they can go back to. if you need it. These are things you can also share links to your podcast on social media. You can share them on your website. If people email you with a question, you can email them the direct link to your podcast. You can create digital or print handouts that you can share with people, where you compile certain podcasts, like certain episodes about certain topics, to help them out. So there's all kinds of ways that you can use podcasts for instruction. And if you have different ideas that I didn't think of, go ahead, you can add those into the Padlet too. I see somebody in the chat. Anna, you have access to the slides after the presentation? Yes. The link is in the chat, and it'll be sent out in an email later too. So we'll go ahead and move on to how understanding podcasts and using podcasts can be beneficial to you in helping patrons who might be interested in creating podcasts. So even if you don't want to create a podcast, you might have people that come in that are interested in it or have questions for you, and you want to be able to help them. So one of the things you can do to facilitate that is to have a space that people can use to record. And that might be all they need, is just a quiet space where they can go and record their things. You can circulate microphones and or headphones so that people can try out things before they commit to purchasing them or use them just for their own podcasts. Just having a list of software and apps and kind of playing around with them yourself to educate yourself about them, so that you can help people with tech support or make recommendations. And this Padlet and this presentation would be a good resource for you guys to come to if, again, you don't want to create it yourself, but you want to. Yes, I will give you some software recommendations a little bit later on. So this is a good resource for you to come to create those lists or make recommendations for people as they come up. If you are interested in starting your own podcast, these are some things that you should think about before you get started. Some of this are things that I've learned over the past year in doing our podcast, just to kind of help you be focused and kind of jump into it a little bit more knowledgeable than I was when we started, because we just kind of jumped in and learned a lot along the way. So the first thing to consider is why. Like, why are you making this podcast? Who is your audience? What is your purpose? Like, what do you want to produce, to gain from this? What's your point? What's the point of doing it? A good question to ask yourself when you're considering that is, what do you know? What's your passion? Because if it's something that you're passionate about and that you know and love, that's going to come through in your podcast, and it's going to get people interested in what you're talking about. People are going to want to listen to you if you're passionate and you're excited about. That's going to also help you determine your length and your format of your podcast, because if you're doing a podcast targeted towards, picture books, well, obviously your podcast isn't going to be an hour long. Whereas if you're doing a, somebody had said a historical podcast about history in your local area, your audience there might have a longer attention span than an audience about picture books. So it's going to help you, again, determine your length, your format, and it's going to keep you focused, because once you start doing your podcast and trying to think of new episodes and topics, you know, when you're brainstorming, you're going to be all over the place. But if you can come back and say, okay, I'm doing this because I want to connect with this group of people to accomplish this specific goal, it's going to help you narrow down your topics and your ideas. So when we started our podcast, our why was we wanted to connect and collaborate with other school librarians. So our audience is mostly school librarians, and then just other educators too. So when we talk about episodes we're going to do and discuss different topics, you know, we try not to go off too many tangents. We try to think, you know, this is who's listening. It's librarians and educators. So that helps to keep us on track. Next thing you want to think about is who you're going to do this with and who else is going to be involved. Are you going to have co-hosts? Are you going to go at it alone? Are you going to have guests and do interviews? There are 3 of us that host our podcast, and I like having a co-host because they provide some accountability. It's somebody that I can bounce ideas off. And if you're nervous about starting a podcast, which I really was nervous about, like just putting my thoughts out there for everyone, it's nice to know that when people are listening, they're not just listening to you. Kind of divides their attention. So that was helpful to me. But some people, they just want to host by themselves. And if that's what you want to do, that's great too. And the next thing to consider is, do you want to have guests? Do you want to interview people? Or do you just want to put information out there without having like a back and forth? Some of our most popular episodes are episodes where we had guests and did interviews. It's always nice to get different perspectives on topics. So I would recommend having guests if you can. I will say that one of our pitfalls that we ran into in the beginning was getting people involved like right from the get-go, because you know, we'd say, hey, do you want to come on our podcast? And you know, we only had 1 or 2 episodes, so we did run into some people not, you know, wanting to get involved in something where we didn't have a lot of history. It's become easier for us to get guests now that we have a year of episodes under our belt. I want to give you a heads up that we ran into issues with that. Maybe you won't, but we did. The next thing to consider is like the nuts and bolts of how you want to plan and prepare. We started out with a script, right? And we pretty much went by the script at the beginning. Now we use an outline, unless it's a topic that we're not really comfortable with, and then we'll go back and have it a little bit more scripted. And that works for us to kind of go back and forth between script and outline, although we do use an outline more frequently now. What are you going to use to plan? So if you have co-hosts, you're going to want to have some way of sharing information as you go. We use Google Keep, and we'll have at any given time 5 or 6 different Google Keep notes open about different topics. And then, you know, anytime we get a resource or some information or something we might want to include about that topic, we just throw it in there. And then once we decide specifically which episode we're going to do at any given time, we just focus on that one Google Keep. And we usually take everything that's in the Keep note and then we put it in a Google Doc to make our our outline. So that's what works for us, but you guys might have another collaborative tool that works. But you are going to want to have something that you share with your co-hosts where you can constantly add to it and change it at any time. And I would highly recommend, if you don't or listen to podcasts now, or you have never listened to a podcast, that that you start listening to podcasts to prepare. It helps with ideas. It helps you to see the flow of how podcasts work. It really helped me with forming my questions for interviews and preparing to have discussions with other people, to listen to other podcasts to see how they do that. The next thing you want to consider is what technology you're going to use. I'm going to be honest, the best thing to do with technology is just jump in and try something and then adjust as you go. You are never going to feel like you are fully prepared with using the technology before you just get in there and use it. So I would recommend starting with anchor.fm, and that's in the Padlet. There's a link for that. That's what we did. We started with Anchor because Anchor, you can record, you can edit, it distributes the podcast for you. It's like all in one, and it's free. So it's a good place to get your feet wet and kind of figure out how podcasting works before you commit to paying for a while we did start with Anchor, now we edit in Audacity, which is also free. So we still use Anchor for to host our podcast, but we edit in Audacity, and we actually record with Google Meet now. Before COVID, when we first started, we would all get together and record in one place so we could see each other. And then when COVID hit, we started recording over our phones. So we were all in different places, and we found that we talked over each other a lot because we couldn't see each other and pick up on those nonverbal cues. So that's when we started actually setting up a Google Meet, or you could set up a Zoom, recording that, taking the audio from that, editing it in Audacity, and then uploading that into Anchor. So that's a pretty recent thing, though. We most of our first year, we used Anchor for everything, and it met our needs. And then as far as scheduling, sorry. I would suggest, as far as scheduling, that you start small. Our first episode was only 11 minutes, and we did not commit ourselves to how often we were going to put out podcasts. Life happens, things come up, and you don't want to feel like you've, let yourself down or let other people down because you said you were going to put something out every week and then you don't. So when we first started, we were like, okay, if we can get one episode out a month, we're good. And there are some months when we put out 2. There are some times where we skip a month. Like right now, we haven't put one out in a while because I just switched jobs. And we've just had a lot going on. So just don't overcommit yourself until you've gotten in there and recorded a few episodes and seen what's involved in the editing and things like that. And I'd also recommend that you record some filler episodes or some filler, what's the word I'm looking for? Episodes, but just, I've lost my word. Okay. Just some filler time, things that you can do, filler content. Thanks, Brian. Things that you can throw up anytime. Like over the summer, we did an episode about makerspaces. Well, that wasn't connected to any particular point in time. It didn't matter when we published that. And we didn't talk about any current events or anything going on in it. So we just took that recording and saved it. And then at the beginning of the school year, when we were all busy and everything was crazy, that's when we published that. So if you can get a couple of some recordings that you can just put aside to use later, that's really helpful if you do have some type of schedule that you stick to. Any questions about this before I get into some specific tools? All right, so again, we use Anchor FM because it's free. You can record, edit, and distribute. Everything's there. In the Padlet, under tools, tips, and guides, I put some other options: Captivate, Podbean, Buzzsprout. These all are podcast hosting sites, and most of them have a trial period and then they are paid. So if those are something you wanted to try out, they are in there. And if you know of any that I didn't include, I can see somebody's already added some stuff to the Padlet. You can go ahead and add in any other suggestions you have. So as far as Anchor, I can, answer lots of questions if anybody has any questions about that, or if you want to me to do like a brief overview of that, I could. Anybody want me to do like a quick demo of Anchor, show you what it looks like? If you do, you can put yes in the chat. If I don't see anybody say yes, then I'll move. All right, so I'll go ahead and open up Anchor just to show you what it looks like. So with Anchor, you can sign in with, if you have a Google account, you can sign in with that. I think you can sign in with Microsoft too. I'm not positive. Or you can just set it up with an email address and password. So once you have logged into Anchor, this is what it looked like. I used a dummy email account for this. So this isn't what, this doesn't have any of our episodes in it. So when you first log in, it kind of walks you through the process and shows you where you are. When you're ready to do your first episode, you just click up here on New Episode. And you've got several options here. So you record. So you just click record, start recording, and say whatever you want to say. Once you stop recording, it's automatically going to take anything that you recorded and put it in your library. So you can see earlier today, I had already just recorded a little thing so you could see it in here. So each segment that you record automatically goes into your library. So the first tab is recording. The second tab is your library where you have all your segments you've recorded. This music tab is new. A little warning about that. If you use music from Spotify, you can only distribute that on Spotify. So people aren't going to be able to hear that music if they're not listening through Spotify. So we haven't done that yet. We have used this free transitional music and sounds here. So you can add those in to your episode, and then your messages. People can share voice messages with you, and it provides a link, and then you can add those voice messages into your podcast. So once you have some recordings in your library, you can click on the dots over here and edit them. So you can download it to edit, or you can delete them. And then when you're ready to actually create your episode, you take your recordings and you pull them over here. And I don't want to try any sponsorships. And then you put them in the order you want to put them in. So, I mean, that's really, really basic, but that's the gist of it. And then if you want transition noises or sounds, you can pull those over in here too and put them where you want. Yes, you can add external music. And I'm going to provide you some resources for royalty-free music and sounds. And yes, you can record with a guest. If you're, yeah, so someone asked if you can record with a guest if you're conducting your interview via video conferencing software. I mean, we record, we've had up to 4 people, and we just record our meet, and then we download just the audio from our Google Meet, and we edit that in Audacity. The link to the Padlet, I can, somebody put it up there for me. Thank you. So, Kareem, I hope that answered your question about recording using video conferencing software. You can also, there's also an Anchor app, so you can record on your phones. And that's what we did when COVID hit and we couldn't be together to record. We would each, we would call in. So you open up the app and you choose record, and then it asks if you want to invite a friend or invite somebody, and then it just texts them the link so that they can click on the link, and it's like a conference call that you record. We did find when we were recording over the phone like that if we talked for more than like 20-30 minutes, it was kind of glitchy. So we got into the habit of talking for 10 minutes and then saving that segment and then doing like another 10 minutes and then just editing them together. So, but you can edit right here in the Anchor app. You don't have to use Audacity if you're not that brave. And another thing is if you're editing, it is easier to edit using the Anchor app than it is on online. All right, any more questions about Anchor or recording? You know, I was an elementary school librarian. Now I'm a middle school librarian. So I'm used to working with, you know, younger students and stuff. So I did want to put up these options for working with younger patrons, either for yourself or if you have like a teacher or a school librarian contact you about doing podcasting. These are some things you could recommend to them. Synth does just really short recordings. Vocaroo I use with kindergartners and first graders, so 5-6-year-olds. and it just does a really simple recording and then immediately gives them a link. And then Flipgrid originally started out as a place to record videos, but they just recently added an audio only option. So that would be good with younger patrons or students to use those tools, because they're really user friendly and simple. Somebody asked, not sure if I missed this, but once it's recorded, how do you publish it? It'll come, I'm going to go back into Anchor and show you that. So once you save your episode up here, then you can either publish it now or save it as a draft. All right. And then the last thing that on this slide is a Wakelet and a Destiny collection to some royalty-free music options and sounds that you could add into your podcast. These were made by my co-host Charity Harbeck. She's the queen of Wakelet and collections. So borrowed her links there. Any more questions about Anchor or any of these other tools? Captioning. I am not sure because it's not visual. So I'm not sure what you mean by captioning ability. You can, I know what you mean. So you can make a transcript of it. I got you. I understand now. Yes, if you can, once it's recorded, there is an option in Anchor for to produce a transcript for sharing. Some other tips or and things that I didn't think about ahead of time when we started our podcast, but I wish I had. When choosing a title, make sure it isn't already out there. So, you know, get online, start Googling things, go on all the different social media places and make sure that whatever you choose for your title, somebody isn't already using. I would suggest not going too trendy. You know, I've seen people do like, you know, TikTok themed things. You just, if your podcast is something that you want to, a project that's going to have a good lifespan and that you're going to stick with and continue doing it, you know, you don't want your title to be something that people are like over by the time, you know, a few months down the road. And claim your title. So, you know, go on, even if you don't ever think you're going to use TikTok or you don't ever think you're going to use Twitter, go ahead and claim that, that handle or that title on there. Set up just a dummy account, because you never know what you're going to want. We did think to do that for Tech Plus Books, and we didn't even use Instagram or TikTok for months and months and months. But when we decided that we wanted to jump into Instagram, we had already claimed the at Tech Plus Books, so we were able to expand our social media presence. As far as social media, consider your audience and where they are online. If you're targeting young adults, you're going to want to be on Instagram and not Facebook. If you're targeting an older audience, you might want to be on Facebook. You might be targeting people who generally, don't like social media at all, in which, you wouldn't want to put a lot of time in your social media presence if nobody is using that. And my last tip is that you take some notes while you record. We initially did not do that, and then we found ourselves going back and re-listening a lot to make sure that everything we included was in our show notes. This is a little bit easier if you have a co-host, somebody helping you out, because they can focus on that. I'm looking in the chat. Is there a way to track streams, plays, etc.? There is. Anchor gives you all kinds of information about where people are listening, what their age is, what are they listening on Anchor or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. So yes, it shows you how many listens you've got on each episodes and all that. And Celia, by show notes, I do mean, the links, titles, anything we mentioned in an episode. And there is a place in Anchor where you can put information about your podcast. That's where we put our show notes. All right, so with Librarians, so I wouldn't want to leave without recommending some books for you. The first book that I would recommend is So You Want to Start a Podcast. It is written by Kristen, Meinzer, and she does the By the Book podcast. She does a couple of other podcasts too. This book is really about building your audience and increasing engagement. It's not really like a nuts and bolts technology kind of book. We have found it really, really useful. One of her tips at one point was to put the name of the people that you interview in the title of your podcast. We were like, okay. But we did that, and we did get more listens. So she's got lots of really good practical tips on starting a podcast. I definitely recommend that. The next one, Podcasting with Youth, does get into more of the technical nuts and bolts of things. And it is specifically for educators and librarians. So I would definitely recommend that if you work with young adults and children. And then the last one hasn't even been published yet. I'm really excited about it. It's supposed to come out in May of this year, A Practical Guide for Librarians. So you might want to jot that down, put that on your buy list. All right. So that is all I have for you guys today. If anybody has any questions or you want to share anything else on the Padlet. So the recording of this will be sent out today with the slides, and the slides have the link to the Padlet in it, and the link to Mentimeter and everything. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Cathy. This was really great.
Thank you.
I'll include the link to the Padlet in that follow-up email as well, so it's just kind of right in everyone's inbox. I didn't know about Anchor, so I'm excited to take a look at that. It makes it so much easier.
Yeah, it really is a good starting point. Some people, some people get nervous because it's free.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, if you really get into podcasting and you are uncomfortable with having a free place host your stuff, there are other options, but for getting started, it's excellent.
Yeah, just like Audacity, I think the free tools are actually pretty decent.
Mhm.
All right, everybody. It's a little before 3 o'clock, but I figure it's a good time to head out. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. And I hope you're enjoying the day wherever you all are. And keep an eye out for that email later today. Feel free to reach out to me in case you don't get that. But I should have everybody's emails. And thanks everybody for joining us.
Thank you all.
Oh, we have a link in the chat for a list of all these different book and library podcasts. Very cool.
I'll add that to the
Ashley is asking if we pay extra for Zoom to offer transcription. Do you have to pay a third party for this service? So actually, this is something that if you just do the update that they recently put out, I just turned on live auto transcription. That's part of Zoom itself. You could do a third party, but I think this kind of gets the job done for the session itself. And then you can always in the recording see the full transcript after. It's not perfect, but I think it is helpful. All right, well, I will close the Zoom meeting now. Feel free to reach out via email. And again, thank you so much, Cathy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everybody.